said the hip hop, the hip it, the hip it to the hip hop. You don't stop the rockin' to the bang bang boogie. Say up jump the boogie to the rhythm of the boogie to beat. Now what you hear is not a test. I'm rapping to the beat, and me, the groove.
All right, we have finally arrived at rap music. Hip hop and rap emerges in Bronx, New York in the mid-1970s, and like the punk movement at CBGB's in New York City, if you don't live in the Bronx, if you don't live in New York, you probably have no idea what rap is in the mid-1970s. In addition to the music, there are other aspects of life associated with hip hop. One is graffiti as an art form, which is tagging subway trains, walls, bridges, things like that. It's also used by gangs to mark territory. They're known for what's called breakdancing, which we'll talk about more in a moment. There's a very specific fashion that goes along with hip hop culture. And it's also known for its neighborhood parties. And actually, these parties are going to play an important hand in how hip hop and rap emerge as a genre. And if you remember back in the 1970s, we talked about reggae with these sound men who would go to parties and play music that they received from America and from the UK. Those sound men moved to New York and began doing the same thing, not with American music, that's the underground musical style, but with rap and hip hop, which is the underground musical style. And I don't just mean that the idea traveled, I mean literally people from Jamaica moved to New York and started doing what they had been doing in Jamaica. The first person to do so that we're going to talk about is called DJ Kool Herc. So literally moved from Jamaica to New York City when he was 12 years old. He would arrange house parties. When house parties began, when he had too many people for a house party, they evolved into park parties. And he would encourage people to dance by speaking like an MC, picking up a microphone and trying to get people up and dancing. If you've ever been to a wedding or a school dance or something, if people aren't dancing, it's kind of lame. So you want to get people out on the dance floor. He would talk over the music, and he developed this idea that we now think of as an MC. So MC just stands for Master of Ceremonies, and it's the person who talks you through an event. Well, the ceremony is the party, and he's the one talking, so he's the MC. Breakdancing evolves at these parties. So what is breakdancing? Well, in order to talk about what breakdancing is, we have to talk about what is a break. A break is literally just a musical instrumental break in a song. And oftentimes, these instrumental breaks, like between two verses or coming out of a chorus, but before the next verse starts something, those are the most interesting musical moments, and those are great to dance over. So what DJs would try to do is to prolong those. So how would they do that? Well, you would take your LP, which is what would have been used at the time, so the way this would work, the way you would prolong a dance break is you would get two copies of the same record. Now, the way this works, as you can see as the light reflects off of this, there are little grooves on the black part. So as the needle moves, that's what plays the music. It's an impression that generates the music and it comes out of our speakers, right? So what DJ Kool Herc would do in order to prolong the break with his two identical copies of a record is on both of the records, he would take a crayon, like a Crayola crayon, and he would draw a little line where the break starts directly onto the album, directly onto the vinyl, and then another break where it ends. So he has one record on his right side and one record on his left side, and he would hold one record still so it wouldn't play. While one record starts to spin to get to the next part, right before it gets to the part where the break would end, he would stop that one by putting his hand on it and let the other one go. And because the crayon mark is there, he knows where it should play from. Then, while one is playing, he's on the other one, and he's backing the record up to the start of that break, and as soon as this one gets to the end, he would stop that and then let this one go, and he would just keep going back and forth, backing one up to that point. So you get this impression that the musical break continues on. Break dancing is when you would come up with a style of dancing to specifically dance over those breaks. One of the most iconic features is that you would have a big old piece of cardboard from a box or something on the ground. It would allow you to spin on it, and you could spin while you danced. One of the most important early rappers is from Barbados but moved to the Bronx. His name is Grandmaster Flash, and he admired and modeled his career in musical stylings after DJ Kool Herc. He had a background in electronics, and he developed this technique called punch phrasing. So punch phrasing is when you have like an orchestra hit, so bow, bow, something like that you've pre-recorded, and you push a button and it makes that sound. Well, he would have the record playing, and he would do something called scratching. Now, he didn't develop scratching, other people did, but it was actually a person named by the name of Grand Wizard Theodore. But Grandmaster Flash was one of the people who used it heavily. So scratching is when you literally move the record back and forth, and the sound you hear is the needle scratching backward or forward against the record. So you would go and push the button, and you would get that going back and forth. So it's something that's a big part of early rap and hip hop, and that's what's going on with this. So with Grandmaster Flash and DJ Kool Herc, between creating breaks, punch phrasing, and scratching, rhythmically scratching, and making sure those breaks line up right where they need to go, there is a great deal of technical proficiency that needs to be present in order to do these well. Now, at this time, mid-1970s, there are no rap records. If you are hearing rap, which at this point is just people speaking over music, sometimes it's poetry inspired by life decisions. Many people suggest it actually comes from Muhammad Ali and the way that he would speak to people before a fight. This was all happening live. There wasn't a place where you could go to buy this. No one had recorded it yet. We also have someone named Afrika Bambaataa, born in the Bronx, was a former gang leader who refocused his efforts to use hip-hop to try to get kids off the street. He was in this group called the Universal Zulu Nation. The Zulu people are from South Africa, an indigenous tribe. And many people say that he invented the term hip-hop in the same way that Alan Freed coined the term rock and roll. He's not going to be the person that brings it into the mainstream, but he's the person who first used the term in New York. Well, how do we get this underground music scene on record in a way where other people can hear it who aren't at these parties? Well, for that, we have to talk about a woman by the name of Sylvia Robinson. So Sylvia Robinson, in the late 1970s, was attending a party in Harlem, and she heard these kids talking over the song Good Times by Chic. Now, she herself had a hit in 1958 with a song called Love is Strange, in 1973 another one called Pillow Talk, so she does know the music industry. What she decides to do is she creates this group called the Sugar Hill Gang, and they take that song, they re-record the instrumental part, and they have this group of guys, the Sugar Hill Gang, rap over it, and that's considered the first rap song. It's called Rapper's Delight from 1979. Now, the opening lyrics to this song are, I said a hip, hop, the hippie to the hip, hip, hop, right? It keeps going back and forth between hip and hop. So a lot of people didn't know what the song was called because they don't actually say Rapper's Delight on it. But as people start listening to this record, their friends have it, they play it at parties, maybe starts to get played on some local radio stations, all of a sudden these kids in New York and in surrounding communities are going to their local record stores and saying, what's that hip hop song? Saying that because that's how the song starts. But that's how the phrase hip hop eventually catches on. That's the opening lyrics. They don't know what the song is called, so they walk in, hey, what's that hip hop song? Do you have that hip hop song? I want to buy that hip hop song. Now, for the first time, you don't actually have to be at one of these parties to hear rap music. One of the other important early rappers is Kurtis Blow with his song The Break. We have Grandmaster Flash, who we already talked about. He has his first hit rap song in 1982. It's called The Message. Very important song in early rap, and actually it was sampled in the musical Hamilton. In Cabinet Battle #1 at the very end, Thomas Jefferson does a play on words, changing the message to reflect the song, but it's the same melody and everything. So go back and listen to the end of Cabinet Battle #1 after you listen to the message and see if you can hear it. So what begins to happen at this point is the music industry people, they see that rap can transfer to vinyl and it's still popular among African Americans in New York. So what will take it to that next step? We went from parties to small-time records. How can we bring it to the mainstream? Who's going to do that? Well, in order to discuss that, we have to move on to rap crossing over. If we were to ask Berry Gordy what it would take to make rap go mainstream, what would he say? Well, he'd probably say you need crossover appeal. That's Berry Gordy's thing, right? That's exactly what happens. We have two men who are roommates at New York University in the early 1980s, Russell Simmons, who's African American, and Rick Rubin, who is white. These two men go on to found a record company called Def Jam in 1983. They understood what it would take to bring rap into the mainstream. And we're going to go through their artists in a minute, but while Russell Simmons is important in the early rap scene, Rick Rubin is going to continue to be important in later rap, going on for 25 years. I think it's absolutely fair to say that from 1955 to 1970, Phil Spector is the most important producer in music. From 1971 to today, Rick Rubin is the most important producer in music. So remember that name. We're going to come back to him many, many times. So let's talk about some of Def Jam's artists. We have LL Cool J with his 1985 hit, I Can't Live Without My Radio, and his 1987 hit, I Need Love, which a lot of people describe as the first like soft kind of love song in rap. We have a group called Run DMC. So Run is the nickname of Joseph Simmons, who is the brother of Russell Simmons, one of the two producers for Def Jam. We also have a man named D for Daryl, the M for Mick, and the D for Daniels gives you DMC, so Run DMC, creating music with DJ Jason Mizell, also known as Jam Master Jay. So their first song is called Rock Box, and it gets MTV Play in 1984 when it's released. And what's amazing about this is Simmons and Rubin knew what to do. They knew that if they wanted to get on MTV, they needed to do what Michael Jackson had done. Michael Jackson had music that was, of course, by a black performer, but he had electric rock guitar in there. He brought Eddie Van Halen on, for goodness sake. So they put electric rock guitar on a rap album, and lo and behold, they have tremendous MTV success with this song Rock Box. The video also contributed to their mainstream success. They had Macaulay Culkin in the video. The next album by Run DMC that we'll look at is from 1986 and is called Raising Hell, and it features a cover of the song Walk This Way by Aerosmith. Walk This Way has one of the coolest drum intros of all time. It's really simple, but the way it just is driving solid beat with the hi-hat opening, it's just super cool, right? So a lot of guys love to rap over that. It was one of those breaks where they would try to line the record up so they could only rap over that. And in fact, what a lot of people would say is, keep that drum beat going, I better not hear that guitar. They didn't want the guitar, they only wanted the drum beat. Well, Rick Rubin says, we're trying to get you on the mainstream. Rather than sampling that beat, you should just rap the whole song. And he goes further than that. He says, you know what, if we're gonna rap the whole song, Aerosmith hasn't had a hit in a while. Let's see if vocalist Steven Tyler and guitarist Joe Perry will just come actually do it with us. It can be a collaboration, Aerosmith and Run DMC. So that's exactly what happens. They cover Walk This Way, but they rap it during the verses, and Steven Tyler sings during the chorus. Joe Perry plays throughout. It was a huge success for both groups, and it was a very important music video. At this time, we start to see a gap between rock and rap. In the same way that rock fans were rejecting disco, they begin to reject rap, and they make claims such as rap isn't music. But this video showing one of the biggest rock bands of the time playing with one of the biggest rap groups of the time is a way that we're starting to kind of bring rap and rock together. It's very slow, but it is a step in the right direction. Another Def Jam artist is the Beastie Boys with their 1986 album Licensed to Ill. The Beastie Boys are a white group made of all Jewish members: Michael Diamond, also known as Mike D, Adam Yach, also known as MCA, and Adam Horovitz, also known as Ad Rock. So their first rap album is a #1 hit with the song Fight for Your Right to Party. Again, big MTV success because Rick Rubin, once again, is combining rap with electric guitar, so musical sensibilities that everyone is interested in. This album is known for its digital sampling, not analog, so we're at this point already moving away from actually scratching a record to doing things digitally. As we move on to this next section, I'll ask you to remember the disclaimer I posted at the beginning of this week. While much of what I was referring to has been present throughout the rock part of the story, it's really going to take effect right now during this next phase that we'll be talking about. So there is a quote that rap is CNN for black people, and that is by an artist named Chuck D from a group called Public Enemy. By the end of the 1980s, rap begins to diversify. So we have the original rap with DJ Kool Herc and Grandmaster Flash, and then we have this sort of trying to go mainstream MTV version of rap with Run DMC and the Beastie Boys. Well, we also see something called reality rap begin to emerge, and reality rap is all about rapping about your actual environment, what you're going through, and the struggles that you are facing in your life and your community. The unfortunate reality is that racism has not diminished by this point. In fact, in many cities, it's just as bad as it's ever been. What rap does, rap records, is it allows African Americans living in these environments to have a voice. So in the same way that CNN tells the world what's going on, rap does that for the African American community. That is absolutely one of the most important quotes you want to remember from this unit. Rap is CNN for Black People by Chuck D, a Public Enemy. So in music, we've seen that there are good guys and bad guys, right? Elvis was a bad guy, Pat Boone was the good guy. The Rolling Stones were the bad guys, the Beatles were the good guys. Well, we've talked about a lot of the good guys so far, but let's talk about who are considered like the bad boys of rap music. In order to talk about that, we have to move over to Los Angeles, specifically Compton, which is an African American community within Los Angeles. And we have to talk about the Los Angeles Police Department. From the 60s to the 90s, we have these horrible trends within the Los Angeles Police Department of police brutality toward people, things like that. One person in particular is by the name of Mark Fuhrman. So Mark Fuhrman was a Los Angeles police officer and later Los Angeles detective. He became a detective in the 1980s. So he was reprimanded for something he did. There was a statue of Martin Luther King, and Mark Fuhrman, a detective, an active duty detective and police officer, spray painted KKK over the Martin Luther King statue. He did a phone interview in which he was describing what it's like to work for the Los Angeles Police Department. A woman was trying to do research to create a film, and he was one of her sources. In this interview, which we have tapes of, they're called the Mark Fuhrman tapes, he uses the N-word more than 40 times alone. In these tapes, he describes police officers, including himself, beating, torturing, and sometimes even killing Black people in the streets and in the police station. They talk about things such as planting evidence and making false arrests. Well, a few things happen that expose the behavior of the Los Angeles Police Department. The first thing that happens is Rodney King. So on March 3rd of 1992, Rodney King is pulled over by a group of white police officers in Los Angeles, and he is beaten horribly, and it's all caught on camera. And that footage is released to news stations. So we see how police are treating this unarmed man. He's on the ground, they're kicking him, they're punching him, they're hitting him with the baton. It's relentless, and it's all being caught on camera. The police officers are tried and are acquitted. It is established that they were defending themselves. Then, 2 years later, a professional NFL football player who also had an extraordinary college career with USC, who has gone on to become a movie star, a television star, and an entrepreneur by the name of O.J. Simpson, is accused of murdering his ex-wife and a friend of hers by the name of Ron Goldman. Her name was Nicole Brown Simpson. During the trial, it is discovered that Mark Fuhrman, this detective that we've been talking about, was the person who recovered all of the evidence that supported the case that O.J. Simpson was guilty of these murders. Because he was the one that found them, private investigators began looking into Mark Fuhrman's past, and they found these tapes that he had recorded with an interviewer. So at this point, I'm going to play these tapes for you. I want to warn you that they're very difficult to listen to, but there's a reason we're listening to it. We're going to talk about what's been called gangster rap, and if you hear gangster rap on its own, you have to ask yourself, why would they say such horrible things about police officers? Well, this is why. These are things that Mark Fuhrman said about his time as a Los Angeles police officer while he was still an active duty detective with the LAPD.